Pakistan loves to play both sides. One hand takes Washington's cash, the other clutches Beijing's loans. For years, this double game gave it dollars, weapons, and a false sense of power. But the world is changing fast. America and China have always vied for supremacy over each other, and Islamabad is stuck between them with an empty wallet and rising militancy at home. Each expects loyalty, each is ready to punish betrayal. And Pakistan's domestic turbulence, from terrorism to political crises, makes the stakes higher than ever before. How long can Islamabad pretend it can profit from both sides before the costs overwhelm its stability and sovereignty? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Pakistan today is caught in a far tighter bind than at any point since 1947. Its geography, bordering Iran, Afghanistan, and China, once guaranteed indispensability to Washington and Beijing alike. Its policy of riding both boats worked precisely because no one forced it to jump. But now, US strategic re-engagement, Chinese security demands, and the high-stakes competition for Balochistan's critical minerals converge. Separatist violence, TTP attacks, and Iranian anxieties over US influence add fuel to the fire. With two rival patrons pressing mutually exclusive conditions, how long before Pakistan's balancing act collapses under its own contradictions? Since independence, Pakistan has treated geography as leverage, not liability. In the early Cold War, it joined SEATO and CENTO to counter communism and secure Western military aid, even as it became one of the first nations to recognize Mao's China in 1950. After the 1962 Sino-Indian War, Islamabad deepened defense ties with Beijing, culminating in the 1963 border agreement. During the 1965 and 1971 wars with India, China offered diplomatic and military backing while the US kept channels open for aid. Pakistan's crowning act of geopolitical brokerage came in 1971, when it secretly facilitated Henry Kissinger's trip to Beijing, laying the groundwork for US-China rapprochement. That earned Islamabad unique status as a bridge rather than a pawn. Even after the Cold War, the pattern continued. Pakistan cooperated with Washington, D.C. during the Afghan-Soviet conflict, then in the post-9/11 war on terror, while simultaneously turning CPEC into the crown jewel of its partnership with Beijing. The message was always the same. Pakistan would help each superpower achieve some goal, but never tie itself exclusively to one camp. Hillary Clinton's blunt warning as Secretary of State captured the US frustration with Pakistan's double games on militancy or terrorism.
As I say in the book, it's like keeping poisonous snakes in your backyard, expecting they will only bite your neighbor. And what we're seeing now is the continuing threat to the state of Pakistan by these very same elements. And my argument to my Pakistani counterparts from the very beginning of my term was that they had to take seriously this threat, and they had to do everything they could to end the relationships that existed between the military and the intelligence services with these groups, and they had to try to end their dangerous behavior both inside of Pakistan, across the border in Afghanistan, and obviously, from my perspective, vis-a-vis India. I also write how when I was in India after the attack in Mumbai, I was very struck how the then government said it was very difficult to exercise restraint.
She said this, recounting how terror camps were mysteriously evacuated after Washington tipped off Islamabad seeking help and coordination. The analogy applied not just to extremist proxies, but to Pakistan's entire foreign policy habit of hedging, using tools for tactical advantage while assuming no blowback. Today, that warning feels prophetic. The same mindset that nurtured proxies against India or Afghanistan now fuels mistrust from both Washington and Beijing. Terrorists hit Chinese engineers in Balochistan even as TTP elements linked to Uyghur extremists threaten Chinese projects. Clinton's admonition was essential. Double games have expiry dates. For decades, Pakistan could ride both boats precisely because neither Washington nor Beijing wanted to push too hard. The US needed Pakistani routes into Afghanistan and intelligence on Iran. China needed Pakistan as a counter-India partner and an Indian Ocean gateway. Islamabad's ambiguity gave each superpower plausible hope of eventual alignment.
Why should it?
Well, the US sees China as a serious threat.
It's a matter of who gives a better deal. It's as simple as that. And we have such a strong... We should not be seeing the relationship with the lens of other country. It has to be standalone. And I did say we have great strategic relationship with China, but we have long-lasting, friendship with the U.S. All the time. So this is objective, and this is the goal of our government to upscale the relationship back to where it used to touch the high points. So it must not be transactional that lows. We are in Cold War together. And then their lows come, and then again we have a better, cooperation, partnership because of the war on terrorism. All these phases we have seen, but we are doing our best to make it strategically economic cooperation and long-term partnership. This is our objective.
But the ground has shifted. US tariffs on Pakistani exports hover near 19%. Yet Washington now hints at preferential access in exchange for clearer cooperation on minerals and on Iran. Beijing, meanwhile, demands ironclad security for its nationals, CPEC projects in Gwadar port, threatening to reassess commitments if Pakistan flirts too openly with American agendas. The luxury of ambiguity is shrinking.
If one looks at what is happening inside Pakistan and the objections being raised by the Pakistan National Assembly, by its economists, by its journalists, and by government officials, they are all protesting at the fact that interest rates are high, that Pakistan cannot repay the interest liabilities, and it will be bought over. In fact, many of them are pointing to the situation like Hambantota and saying that Gwadar will actually belong to China.
Balochistan concentrates every element of the looming clash. The province's lithium, rare earths and copper are magnets for both US diversification away from China and for China's Belt and Road Initiative and supply chains. Washington has labeled the Baloch Liberation Army a terrorist group, but simultaneously eyes the region's resources. All-weather friend of Pakistan, China. Its stake is even deeper. CPEC's arteries run through Balochistan into Gwadar, making security there a red line issue. Attacks on Chinese workers and infrastructure are rising. Beijing suspects US covert support for Baloch separatists or for TTP factions hostile to Chinese interests. Iran views growing US activity in Balochistan as a pretext for spying or subversion against its regime. Islamabad thus faces not just a US-China squeeze, but a potential Iranian backlash, three sets of demands pulling in opposite directions on the same terrain. The security environment compounds the problem. Baloch separatists denounce Chinese investment as neo-imperialism. TTP harbors elements tied to Uyghur militants hostile to Beijing. And Washington sees Islamist groups as either threats or potential levers depending on circumstance. Only ISIS-K unites all three capitals in opposition. Everything else is a web of crossed interests and mutual suspicion. Every new attack on a Chinese convoy or on Pakistani security forces in Balochistan tightens Beijing's pressure. Every Pakistani crackdown on militants or terrorists that Washington deems useful weakens the US connection. Islamabad risks being punished no matter which side it leans toward. Beijing is trying to lock Pakistan into its orbit through trilateral talks with Afghanistan, promises of law enforcement cooperation, and demands for mass deportations of Afghans accused of harboring terrorists. Its principle of indivisible security means Your domestic instability threatens our projects, so fix it, or we will reconsider our investments. The US meanwhile plays a subtler game, inviting Pakistani generals to high-level discussions and reminding them of decades of military ties dating back to Ayub Khan. American endorsement still confers legitimacy on Pakistan's hybrid military-civilian regime, especially at moments of domestic political crisis such as the detention of Imran Khan. This is Washington's leverage, recognition and market access rather than cash handouts. Trade with the US remains a lifeline. Tariff reductions could bring desperately needed export revenue. Yet Pakistan cannot alienate China, its main arms supplier and domestic shield at the United Nations, its all-weather friend. Each superpower attaches conditions. The US expects policy alignments that irritate neighbors and Beijing alike. China expects political stability and tighter security around CPEC. Thus, while the US offers carrots, China wields sticks. Islamabad's room for maneuver shrink as domestic anti-China sentiment grows and as American patience wears thin. This is not a win-win, but a looming lose-lose. Pakistan's balancing has ripple effects across its borders. Cooperation with the US on operations affecting Iran risks Chinese anger and Iranian retaliation. Simultaneously, drifting too far toward Beijing alienates Washington and spurs closer US-India coordination. Even Afghanistan, whose territory has hosted Pakistani strikes on TTP hideouts, becomes another source of instability, complicating both patrons' agendas. All signs point to Balochistan as the arena where Pakistan may finally be forced to choose. US-Pakistan mining deals and intelligence cooperation on Iran will collide head-on with China's insistence on exclusive security guarantees and ensuring that Iran is safe. Beijing has already signaled that CPEC's future depends on Islamabad's reliability. Washington is signaling tariff carrots and mineral partnerships, but only for a partner, not a double agent, not a double dealer. When that ultimatum arrives, Pakistan will discover that decades of avoiding hard choices have left it with few friends who truly trust it. What was once hailed as shrewd statecraft now looks like overplayed opportunism. The snakes in your backyard Clinton warned about were not just militants or terrorists, but habits of duplicity. Each deal made in secret, each proxy nurtured for leverage, each hedged promise to a great power, all created a cycle of short-term gain and long-term vulnerability.
The administration is withholding $255 million in assistance to Pakistan. There are clear reasons for this. Pakistan has played a double game for years. They work with us at times, and they also harbor the terrorists that attack our troops in Afghanistan. That game is not acceptable to this administration. We expect far more cooperation from Pakistan in the fight against terrorism. The President is willing to go to great lengths to stop all funding from Pakistan as they continue to harbor and support terrorism.
Today, those vulnerabilities converge. Militant blowback at home, rival superpowers abroad, and a restive province sitting on the minerals both crave. The double game is no longer a strategy, it is a trap. If Islamabad leans openly toward Washington, China could scale back arms supplies, CPEC investments, and UN cover. If it leans toward Beijing, the US may tighten tariffs, cut intelligence cooperation, or back rival mineral ventures with India and Afghanistan. Either path risks domestic instability and external retaliation. Yet indecision is no solution either. The US-China rivalry is sharpening, not easing. Pakistan's only real choice is which set of costs it is willing to bear, and whether it can reform its internal security policies enough to regain credibility with either side. For 70+ years, Pakistan's balancing act between Washington and Beijing looked like nimble diplomacy. It leveraged geography, militant proxies, and shifting alliances to extract maximum benefit without paying a loyalty price. But every balancing act has a tipping point. Today, That point is Balochistan, where lithium, insurgency, Chinese engineers, US mineral ambitions, and Iranian suspicions all collide. Hillary Clinton's warning echoes louder than ever. You can't cultivate snakes and expect them not to bite you. Nor can you ride two rival superpowers forever without falling off one or both boats. Pakistan is about to find out what happens when the world's two biggest powers stop tolerating hedging and start demanding commitment. Will Islamabad finally pick a side, or will it discover too late that trying to keep everyone happy can leave you friendless and exposed? Thank you for watching Statecraft.